The Dice Tower, episode 585, Pieless in Seattle.
The Dice Tower is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. This episode is sponsored by USAopoly. Share laughter and make memories. Welcome to The Dice Tower, a podcast about board games and card games, and especially the people who play them.
In today's show, Mandi reports in from the Dice Tower retreat, and we'll get your take on game setup and cleanup in Victory Points. I'm Suzanne Sheldon.
And I'm Mandi Hutchinson.
And Mandi, I am so mad at you and Tom.
Uh-huh.
Okay, well, maybe I'm not mad, but I'm definitely envious, just seething in envy, because I saw on social media you post a photo from the Dice Tower retreat that you are currently at. And it was like a table full of, it looked like it was 24 pies, all different beautiful pies.
There were so many. And let's be clear, it was a video. To get in its glory.
Yes, it was a video because a photo couldn't capture all of the pies that were in that. Were they good? I mean, and they all looked like so many different flavors.
Oh, there were a ton. There was, I think there was like raspberry. Tom even named one boring, which is literally just regular key lime pie. Yeah, it was crazy. They had like things strawberry, like all kinds of fun flavors. And then we settled on a flavor called soursop. So I'm familiar with this fruit.
I'm sorry, what?
Soursop.
I have never heard of this.
Yeah, so they eat this in the Caribbean. It looks it's like prickly on the outside. And when you open it, it almost has like fleshy, it's like a white, like a lychee kind of colored on the inside. But the flavor is very fresh tasting. It's really good. A lot of people think, oh, it's going to be gross, it's sour. No, it's actually very light, fresh taste to it. So I personally, that's the one I tried. It tastes delicious. So I was really happy to see really fun flavors there. But yeah, I literally got that little morsel and that was it. Like people loved it.
Well, I kindly enough, Tom extended an invitation to the Dice Tower retreat to me, as well as you and you know, all the Dice Tower folks. And I just couldn't make it work, which is fine. But I will just note for the public record that Tom made no mention that there would be a parade of pies at the Dice Tower retreat, which I feel like was an intentional omission by him.
Yeah, probably. He didn't want to make you feel bad.
Oh, is that it? Oh, gee, thanks. Thanks for that.
But I totally did by posting that video and tagging you.
And thanks for that, Mandi. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Merry Christmas.
But this is a podcast about board games and card games, not about pie, contrary to what it may feel like. And Mandi, you're actually at the Dice Tower retreat right now. And I know you're doing more than eating pie. How's it going? I'm so curious because this is really the first time that Tom's ever tried these.
Yeah, so it's been really good. So I apologize in advance. My voice is going to be a little squeaky or scratchy because, well, it's me. So I'm losing my voice because I've been talking a lot, lots of games. I am actually missing a game of Millennium Blades so we can record. And I've rescheduled till tomorrow.
I love Millennium Blades.
So good. So no, it's okay. We're still going to play, but definitely lots of games and lots of really great people. People I don't know if I would have known otherwise because maybe they don't attend conventions or they're not on social media, but just lovely. I think I've signed shirts with really fun, cool things. And I hope this is a little bit of a shout out because it was really, really nice. But, Ben bought me a very large box of Nerds. It is the biggest box of Nerds I have ever seen.
The candy?
The candy. Like it is amazing. So
you're holding up a hand gesture, and just to give scale for the listeners, it's like Mandi's holding up a hand signal that like spans her shoulders.
It's like a cereal box size, so it's big.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot of Nerds.
Yeah, so it was really cool because we had breakfast at Cracker Barrel. And then, of course, Jason was showing us the game they have there. I'd never been to Cracker Barrel, so that was kind of fun. And then, playing lots of games in the library. There's a ton of games, and a lot of them are ones we saw at Essen that came over. So taught a game of Blackout. Hong Kong. What else? I teach key flow, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. There's been quite a few. I've learned a few myself. There's a couple that I'm really excited to play. I don't know if I can talk about them right now, but coming soon.
So how many people do you feel are there?
I think I heard the number was 60, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh my gosh, that's so small.
Yeah, like it's really small, but it's nice. But I think what's going to happen, and I'm sure Tom will talk a little bit more about this, is he wants to have it slightly bigger, not crazy, but just a little bit more people to come. Yeah.
I love that. I love small conventions. I really do, because they just feel intimate and casual, and you get to know the people a little bit more and play the games. And
Absolutely.
I'm pie and people, and now I'm super jealous.
Yeah, it's been really great. Like I said, I've met a lot of people here that I may not have met otherwise. So it's been fantastic. So, and I know Eric probably talked about his experience. I know I saw a lot of pictures, had a really good time. So it's been great. It's been great.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I'll have to keep my eye out for what they plan on doing with that next year. Now that I know there's pie parades.
Well, next year, actually, I can talk about it, actually. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I think Tom was saying maybe closer to 200.
Whoa.
So maybe a little bit bigger, and it'll be 1, not 2.
That makes sense. I think.
Yeah, and I
think that they split it into. I don't think they wanted to split into 2. I think that when Tom initiated this idea, he had space limits because last minute, relatively last minute planning all this other stuff, and then more people want to come than they could fit in, so that's why they split it. But I don't think he ever intended it to be 2 weekends.
No, I just think it's how it worked out. And the month will change. He's looking, I think, more closer to September.
Oh.
Versus December. Yeah.
That's good to know.
That's something. So he'll give more details, I think, coming soon, but that's, I think, where it's going. So yeah, I think it's going to be really good.
Well, that's awesome. I'm also envious of all your game playing time, because I had to cancel one of my game nights last week, and that super bummed me out. Work has been kind of in the end of year crunch, where everybody's trying to get those last minute things in. So I'm glad. I love seeing all the pictures coming out of the retreat of all the wonderful games you're playing. But I mean, that doesn't mean game playing stops over here. Are you going to be talking about any of the games that you've been playing there, or are these all the games that you've been played previously?
No. So what should I say here? So these are games I played previously, but I only got to play them once. Now I've been here and I've been playing them a few times. So now I can actually talk about them.
I love it. All right. Well, let's get to it. I want to hear about them.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. So, as Suzanne talked about, I've played quite a few games here at the retreat. Definitely able to solidify some of the ones I'd played previously. So we're going to jump right in. So as I mentioned before, I had a chance to play Key Flow. This is one that I had backed on Kickstarter, and I had played at another convention and actually was taught the game by one of the designers, Richard Breese. So Key Flow is designed by Sebastian Bleasdale, Richard Breese, and Ian Vincent. The art is by Vicky Dalton, and it's published by R&D Games. So as in previous episodes, we do like to provide you with the pricing. We get them through Cool Stuff Inc. or other websites in the US to kind of compare the pricing. And in Canada, it's taken from the online store Board Game Bliss. Okay. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of cost. So 64 Canadian for Key Flow and $60 US for that as well. So it plays 2 to 6 players in 45 to 75 minutes. Wow. I am sounding rough. I am so sorry for your poor ears, but I will try to make this work. So if you're familiar with Keyflower, you will definitely see some familiar elements in this game. It's not the same, but some things may be familiar to you. Keyflow uses cards instead of, okay, and I want to get this right. So they use cards with keeples on them versus the actual wooden meeples to activate buildings. Yeah, so it's kind of cool. So as I said before, it's a card-driven game. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to develop your own kind of village, and you're trying to score points for buildings, animal keeples, resources, and other items that you're going to have in your town. So Keyflow is played over 4 seasons or rounds. And then in each season, you get a different amount of cards that are going to be drafted So you don't get your hand and, hey, these are mine. Oh, no. You can look at them. They're so great, but you have to pick one. And then you have to pass them either to the right or the left. It's indicated on the card, which is kind of nice. And then you continue doing that until all cards have been drafted. So you do it in seasonal order, spring, summer, fall, winter. Winter cards are a little bit different. You end up getting a few cards in the beginning because a lot of them are end game scoring that you can kind of peek at every so often to see, oh, maybe I might want to hang on to that one during the draft. But the winter season will be played much like the others. So on a turn, you're actually going to draft the card. So once everybody's done that, you've picked it and passed the cards to the left or right, depending on the season, everybody flips at the same time. So you resolve it at the same time, and it can go in a few places. Everybody starts with a home card. So if you're not familiar with the game, the home card allows you to, when activated, move resources around to get them 2 cards to upgrade. And it also does an upgrade action. So upgrading buildings to make them better. So everyone starts with one of those. And you also start with a card that you're like, oh, it's colorful and nice. When we're done around, the keeple cards that you use on your tableau are going to go under this card and potentially could be counted for endgame scoring, depending on cards that you choose. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. Won't go too much detail, but give you an idea. So once you flip your card, it can either be a keeple card, which would be used to activate a building. Here's the thing. You can activate a building in your tableau, or potentially to your neighbor on your right, or to the neighbor on your left. So depending on the keeple card you have, it'll have arrows letting you know where you can play it, either only to the left or right, or maybe you can either play it in your tableau or either of your neighbors, or maybe just in your own tableau. The meeples are different, or the keeples are different colors depending on the season, so those will change. Once you've activated a building, then you follow what it does, so potentially giving you resources or something to that effect. Keep in mind, if you play on somebody else's tableau, they get to keep that card at the end of the round. So in essence, you could be feeding into their endgame scoring. Are you following me? I know this is a bit much, so give you an idea.
Well, I think, Mandi, have you played Key Flower?
Yes, I own Key Flower. So some of it's going to be similar.
There are some similar elements. So I'm just, as you're talking, because I have not played Key Flow yet. In fact, I just bought it.
Right.
I'm mentally associating some of the things. So it's making sense if you have that context for sure.
Right. So just to give people a bit of background who have not played Keyflower. So we do this for every round. So you pick a card, you all play it simultaneously, passes, pick another card and play simultaneously. And it continues like this till all cards have been played out. So at the end of the round, that's where they have these tokens with meeples, so you can do additional actions in your tableau potentially. And then you're going to collect all the keeple cards that were played in your tableau and put them under that little card that I was talking about. You can only look at those cards at the end of a season. So if you're trying to look forward for endgame scoring, you are not allowed to look at those cards during a season. So you might sit there and go, oh my goodness, how many red ones do I have? Or how many blue ones do I have in there? You can't look until the end of the season. Yeah, so you got to remember. So that gives you the general gist of it. You play through all seasons, and then at the end of the seasons, you calculate buildings that would score based on how many pigs you have, or how much gold you have, or certain type of resource. Keeping in mind that cards can only be used, and resources can only be used once. So if you have a card that scores, you have 2 cards that scores gold, you need to pick one, or split them out however you want, but you cannot use it to score for both cards. Some of the cards that have the keeples on them also have animals on them. You have to choose. If you have an animal scoring and a keeple scoring, which one are you going to do? Because you can't split up the cards to score resources and animals. You got to pick one. So it's hard because you really have to maximize as much with your scoring as like, okay, this card can score here. This one should score here. It's a lot of craziness at the end. A lot of math. There's not a score pad, so you have to I do it in my head, but yes, sometimes it helps to group things together to figure it out. Oh, so after all that, most points win. So that's the general gist of the game. The first playthrough of this, it's a bit bumpy, especially if people are not familiar with Keyflower, but it does have a more streamlined feel to it, and it's not nearly as long. So I think if you like Keyflower, you will like this and find it different enough that you could own both. Because I also own Keyflower. I definitely think you will see some differences. The cards are great. Like I love the keeple cards, and I like that you can play them on other people's buildings and kind of let them build stuff. Oh, I'm going to use that, but you could be helping them at the same time. So it's a lot of decisions. So I definitely know my group we found it much more streamlined. Still liked Keyflower. This is different, but we found that part of it was nice. The scoring at the end's a bit of a doozy because there is no score pad. So it's literally, I mean, it's a minor thing. You just have to kind of maybe group your things together. It's a bit difficult if you're trying to just do it off the top of your head. You might have to organize a bit. So that part seemed a bit odd. But when I'm teaching it, I generally try and do it one at a time so we can kind of see how that's done. So I definitely like that part, the Keeple card and how you can use that in other buildings. I did find sometimes we had cards where it was just a lot of Keeples and not a lot of buildings. So I found that really affected maybe how my town worked. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes you would have a hand that was all Keeples or like a majority of Keeples. And then someone would have a hand that was all buildings. I know eventually it'll go around to you, but if you're playing a large game, by the time it comes back to you, a lot of the buildings maybe are plucked out and you're like, oh, well, I guess I can use this and activate. I mean, they have a rule that if you're not able to use a card, you can kind of toss it and get one of those little meeple tokens that you can use. But that for me was hard sometimes. And I don't know if that's something that some people might be okay with it. For me, I just feel like, I don't know, the distribution, depending on how many players you play with, will depend on how many cards are going to be in the deck. So that's something else to consider. When you're setting up the game, player count makes a difference. Certain amount of cards come out. Certain amount of cards are passed through the game. The setup's a bit fiddly, not going to lie to you. And it has to be, right? They have to scale it for players. So there's 2 different types of cards in each color, K cards and then the numbered cards, which tells you for player number if you're playing with 4 players, 5 players, and so forth. So the setup's a bit of a doozy, but it has to be done. Word of advice when teaching this game, don't try and spew it all out because it's a lot. I highly recommend giving a lot of the basics and then walking people through around. People tend to kind of click with it around the second season. So overall, I won't talk any more about it. I know it's a lot to take in. I rather enjoyed it. I definitely think this one would hit the table a little more often than Keyflower due to the time constraints. Sure. It's shorter. So I definitely think that works. And people who are maybe not as familiar with a type of game like Keyflower, these sorts of games, might find this a bit easier to learn. So that is Key Flow. I enjoyed it. I very much enjoyed it.
That's awesome. I love Keyflower. It's one of my favorite games, honestly. And I really like what you were talking about with the meeple cards and how you can use them. I think it's interesting how they get stacked and you can't check and all that other stuff. It's funny you chose to talk about it because I was, I somehow got sucked into an online purchase and Keyflow just jumped into my cart just out of nowhere. I don't know how it got there.
Oh, hi.
So I'm extra excited to give it a try now. I tend to be a fan of this series of games. So that sounds great.
Yeah, I think you'll like it quite a bit. Yeah, you'll like it a lot.
Well, on a very different end of the gaming spectrum in some ways, Qwango is the game I wanted to talk about first. This is a roll and write game. And I was thinking, gosh, I love Qwango so much. And then I thought, have I talked about it on the podcast? And I checked and I don't think I had. So I have to correct that mistake. Qwango, Qwingo. Qwango is actually a rebrand of a game called Top 12. And Qwango fits in the line with Quicks and what's the other one? Quinto, right? But it's not a game right version. Yeah. But Qwango is the game right edition, and it comes in this little bright box, and it's a roll and write game that uses just one custom die. And really,
so before you go any further, how much does this one run for? Is it expensive?
No, this is dead inexpensive. I mean, I think the retail price is $15, and you can usually find it less expensive than that, even on the shelf. Like I find it at Target in the US, and it's often on sale, and you can get it for like $10. And
not bad.
Yeah, exactly. And you have one custom die, and you have a pad of sheets. And in the Qwango edition, it's got like fruit icons on it. It's a cute little custom die. And all you're trying to do is roll the die. You say a number, you roll a die, and you write that number in the column that matches the face of the die. I just taught you how to play Qwango.
Oh, wait.
No, it's one of these. It's a fascinating little game. You just have this die. And basically what happens is you get this sheet, and it has columns that match the die faces. And at the start of the game, you're going to write a 10, a 20, a 30, a 40, and a 50, one in each of these columns.
Okay.
Anywhere you want. And there's one number per column. And then each player in turn order, you say a number, you roll that die, and then all players have to write that number in the column that matches the die face. So if I say 12 and I roll a banana, I have to write a 12 in the banana column, but anywhere in that column that I legally can. And the rules for the columns are simple. Your numbers must go from low to high, from the top to the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So they must get higher as you go down in a single column. That's really the rule. And it's a race game. The first player to complete a column wins the game. Ta-da, game over. It's incredibly simple from a rule set point of view and incredibly light on a component point of view.
Mm-hmm.
But Qwango deserves more attention than it gets because it's playing the odds. It's definitely got some push your luck, and it is incredibly interactive for what it is because it starts out differently from the beginning where people are writing their numbers and wherever they want, and that automatically differentiates the sheets usually. But even if everybody writes the same thing, as those numbers are getting, you're making different choices about where these other numbers go, and inevitably you're going to roll something and you can't put it in because you wrote a 22 and then you wrote a 32, not leaving any space, thinking, okay,
right.
When am I ever going to get, a 30 banana or whatever? And you're stuck. And you're looking, when you play Qwango, you find you're looking around at what other players have, especially mid to late game. You are definitely making choices about what number you are choosing based on what other people have available or do not have available. So you're trying to find that perfect number that you feel like you could write anywhere, but that other players would have more limitations around.
Right.
So it is, for such a simple game on so many levels, inexpensive, simple rule set, simple component set, Qwango is a solid and interesting roll and write experience. It plays off of players more than many, many others. A lot of roll and writes get criticized or complimented on feeling like it's multiplayer solitaire. And Qwango can absolutely play just fine solitaire. You play it and then you count how many turns it took you to fill in a column. But it is the psychology and the awareness of what your opponents are doing and how you pick those numbers that I think makes Qwango shine and stand apart in that roll and write field. So that's Qwango from Game Right.
So the first time I played this game, my friend pulls it out and I'm like, okay, where did you get this bargain basement looking game here? Like there's nothing wrong with bargain basement games. Don't get me wrong. It just looked rough when I saw it. And I was like, okay. So then she pulls it out. I'm like, oh boy. And I saw the fruit. And then I'm like, okay, I'm all about the fruit, but I'm like, okay, I didn't see where it was going. So I wasn't expecting too much. Great. It's like a thing. We'll play it. It'll be light and interesting and move on. It was so much fun. We had so much fun playing it. And it's all like, you get a piece of paper and one die with some fruit on it. And it's so much fun. We had a great time with it. Honestly, it's one that I've actually been trying to find and I can't seem to get a copy.
Oh, I didn't know you need. I will bring you a copy.
Oh,
I will see you in January. I will bring you a copy, Mandy.
Perfect. Look at that. I get free games on the show. I'm loving that.
Woohoo.
Well, back to my list, which seems to be, I'm looking at it. And so it seems I played a lot of heavier games versus this. And she's like, I think you've got a couple midway. But yeah, so I apologize if I'm really chatty and squeaky, but I picked these heavy games. So the next game I'm going to talk about is The Boldest. And this is designed by Sophia Wagner. Artist is Max Prentice, and the publisher is Stronghold and edition Spielweis. So it's 2 to 5 players. It plays in 30 to 90 minutes, and it retails for about 70 Canadian and 80 US. So I was very interested to see that different price point in the US. So, okay, well, there you go. That never happens. So, in the game, when you look at the box, the art is actually pretty cool. And even throughout the game, I found the art was really neat. You're trying to defeat mechanical monsters and retrieve basically artifacts. And you're going to use these items to lead your faction to glory. That is literally what it says. So before we start in the game, every group has a faction that's kind of assigned to, so to speak, or that you choose that you're going to have. And with that, you get cards. And in these cards that you have heroes and adventurers, and they have these little symbols on them. Like, I think, what is it? Warrior is the sword. And I think you have a mechanic, which is the wrench. You have the cooks with the little pots on the card. And, there's the animals with the little paw print. Oh, yes. And the archers, I think, or something to that effect, with a little bow and arrow in the corner. So these are important. It sounds silly. Why I need to talk about them? They're important because they come into play when you play your cards and the turn order in which it allows you to pick cards off the board. So that being said, the main board has, I don't remember the exact terminology for the cards that are on the board. But they're kind of these square cards. They have a number in the upper left, right corner, which is going to be victory points if you're able to secure them. And then some of them will have requirements on them, requiring you to have a certain item in order to take it. Or if it has a certain symbol on it, only certain types of cards you play can take them, that sort of thing. But there are some restrictions on how the cards are taken, depending on where they are in the tableau. You also have another area where there are other adventurers and heroes that you can acquire to make your deck better. So they give you special abilities or potentially give you more of a specific symbol, like those mechanic symbol with the wrench and that sort of thing. Then you have the King's area where some cards are going to go once you've played them out. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then each player has their own board, which has like a dormitory, and it looks like they've gone drinking. So one side, it's a discard. So that's where you've gone and have your drinks and celebrate. And oh my goodness. And then you get to sleep it off, which is your dormitory. And those are cards that you're going to have for use during your turn. There's a little shield that you're going to put in front of you. And when you're planning your cards, the shield goes in front of that. So in the game, they have a little deck that kind of times it depending on how many players are playing. What you're going to do on your turn is first, set up the board depending on player count. And then what you're going to do is you have your deck of cards you're going to go through, and we have kind of 3 parts in a turn. So you get to play 3 times, 3 sets of cards. So you want to choose cards based on their grouping. So maybe you want to play warriors. And then in the second part of that round, you'll play cooks. And then the third part, it might be mechanics. They're all going to get resolved the first round, then the second part of the round, and then the third part. So it's important to look at the order of how they're played, because depending on which cards you play will depend on which group is going to go first. And not only do you need to know that, you also need to have the most, because someone else may also play warriors. And you're like, well, wait a minute. How many do you have? How many do you have? So this is where it got a bit different for me, because I played with 3 players and it's different. Whoever has the most gets to take the action of taking one of those cards off the board, which have the victory points. And then the other player goes, oh, well, I guess I'm not going to go on an expedition today. And they basically get to put that card in their dormitory, and they're going to take one off the top of the deck to get a random hero or adventurer. So they don't get to get victory points, but they do get something. The person who played and won ends up losing a leader, unless it's a cook, but ends up losing a leader, and that card goes away. So you do lose cards in a turn. So we do that. And in a 4-player game, 2 people get to do some exploring or go on an expedition. And it's that third person who may have played the same faction who says, okay, well, I guess I'm not going on an expedition, and they just get the card. So that was interesting for me between the 3 and the 4-player games. I hadn't played the 4 until today. Mm-hmm. So we do that. I won't go into too much detail about that, but we do 3 of those like that in a round, so to speak. And then you're going to reset the board and then do it all over again. It's hard to kind of picture without seeing it, because this is so different from Noria, which was another game that Sophia Wagner has done. And that is definitely higher end of the spectrum for brain burn. This one is definitely a little bit on the lighter end, because it plays in a shorter amount of time, because you only do so many rounds depending on player count. I think it ends up being 3 or 4. And I think it plays, 30 to 90 minutes. So it's not long, and it's all cards. It's all based on cards, when you play them, how you play them, if someone's beating you, that sort of thing. And that's literally for the majority, that's the game. Mm-hmm. The first time I played it, I was like, I don't know. It wasn't bad. I just wasn't sure. I did like it with 3, but I did find we were at each other a lot, because only one person gets to go on the expedition, versus with 4, 2 people. So you have more of a shot of people kind of getting in there to go on the expedition to get those cards for victory points. So that definitely changed it for me. So I definitely enjoyed it. I have to get Nori out of my mind because it is a completely different game. Do you know what I mean? But it's a lot heavier. So you can't compare it to that. They are completely different ends of the spectrum. I really enjoyed the art on this game. The theme for me initially didn't connect. But then once I played it, I was teaching another group today. And as we were talking about it and as we were using the terminology in the story, it seemed to fit better. Do you know what I mean? I don't know how to explain it.
Sure.
So the theme started to come through a bit. So I really enjoyed it. Now, component quality for me here, I had some issues with the shield. It literally, every time somebody walked by the table, it would fall over. And I'm like, okay, I just couldn't be bothered. It had the steps of how to play the game on the back, which I can appreciate. So I just use it as a player aid. And then I just put my cards face down when I was planning them. The shields were a problem for me. They weren't long enough, weren't standing. So some of the components I had some issues with. Some of the colors on the cards were hard to differentiate which goes in which pile. Some of them looked the same, but they were actually different. So components could have been adjusted a little bit, but the game itself, we enjoyed it. I know one of the gentlemen I played in our group said that this is something his kids could enjoy. And I think they're about 12 or so. And he said, yeah, definitely one we could play with the family. I think overall it was a really good experience. And I definitely enjoyed it. Definitely one I would play again. My only issue is replayability. Is it going to change after 6, 7, 8, 9 plays? Do you know what I mean? And I'm concerned that it's going to be much of the same. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you are looking for something that's vastly different, I don't necessarily think you will get this here. But if you're okay to enjoy the experience as it is, I think you will enjoy it. So the boldest for me, I liked it.
I've only played it once, so I didn't feel ready to review it. But I feel like one of the things that I wanted to bring up is the art a little bit more, and just how amazing the art is too.
It's really good.
It's really cool art, and it definitely is a joy to look at. I agree with you about the player shields, and the flags for that turn order thing.
Yes,
they're very thin cardboard, and I wish they had been chipboard, but that seemed like a nitpick. But the thing that really connected with my one play is that it's definitely a lighter game and pretty straightforward to play in terms of meeting the requirements and getting cards and things like that. So definitely a lighter game than Noria, which is great. It's a lighter game and it has gorgeous art. So I'm looking forward to trying it again. I've played it at 5, the full player count.
Oh, you did play it at 5. Okay.
And it has that same thing where 2 people can go on the expedition, but we felt like that meant it didn't have quite as much tension.
That's true.
So I don't know, but I can't really speak to it because I haven't played in a smaller player count, which I want to try. I want to try it with 3, so I'll have to.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what you think at 3. I mean, I liked it with 3, but definitely it was a little bit more like, oh, okay, one of you going and then the rest. Sorry, too bad, so sad. So,
well, we'll revisit
I guess it would depend on how you like it.
I play, and we'll see what we think.
Yeah, so there you go. So that is the boldest.
One of the games I picked up at Essen, and it was on my top 10 for Essen, was Neom from Lookout Games. And this was designed by Paul Sotosanti. And I think Christian, I'm not really sure, but Christian Operer is the artist, the illustrator, and Clemens Franz did the graphic design. I'm not sure how much of the art itself Clemens did, but it's got Clemens Franz on it. So I love Clemens's work. So I have to take a look. And coming in the US, it is about $50 for pre-order from what I could see. So that is something that should be available soon here, but isn't quite yet. And in Neom's actually, when people are trying to give that short, pithy description of it, people are saying it's kind of like a cross between Seven Wonders and Suburbia.
Oh, okay.
Now, whether or not you agree, I get it. I don't know if that really resonates with me personally, but I can see where people are coming from. So in Neom, this is a tile drafting game and city building game. So that's where you get the Suburbia thing. And then the drafting is the Seven Wonders. So you get a hand of tiles and you go, I think, just through 3 rounds. And you pick a tile and you're going to place it on your board and go around and build up your city. And then tiles have points on them. Some have produced resources. and some have end game scoring, all this other stuff. And it's like mini tile placement games where depending on what they're next to, that'll change how much they're worth. And so you're trying to maximize points based on that.
Okay.
There are roads on the tiles, and placement does matter because your new tile always has to connect back to your center city tile, but you can block off roads too. So there's a little bit of flexibility. Road planning does come into play definitely as you're taking tiles, and you have to make sure you have a place that you can adequately play it. And there are events in these 3 rounds as well. So the tiles are kind of randomly shuffled and dealt out for the draft, and somebody's going to have the event tile, and that could be a fire, it could be a crime. And when that event gets toggled, then you either have to pay a lot of money or you usually end up having to remove tiles from your city. Both are bad. So bad things happen when events happen, unless you happen to have built in ahead with some of the tiles like a police station or a fire station that lets you protect your tiles from the negative event things. There are also cornerstone tiles, and each player will have 3 of these at the beginning of the game. And cornerstone tiles are usually end game scoring tiles of some sort that provide an extra boost. And you can only have 1 per round out. So in the first round, you could only have 1 out. If you try to put a second one out, you're breaking the rules and you can't do that. So you're drafting tiles, you're placing them on, you're connecting roads, you're collecting resources. Resource management's a big thing in this game. There are 3 tiers of resources, from simple ones like wood, and then the wood advances to a plank. And then on the higher tier, there's things like jewels and pool noodles. I don't know what the actual resource is. It's this little green macaroni looking thing.
Pool noodle.
Which we just call the pool noodle because that's exactly what it looks like. My apologies. I'm sure it's not supposed to be a pool noodle, but it's way more fun to think of a pool noodle as an advanced resource. I just got to say.
That is fair.
And what's going to happen is that when you have a tile that produces a resource, you get a token that represents that resource and you put it to your side. You're not really collecting actual resources. It's just saying that you are producing this resource. And a lot of the resource counts are qualifications, not spending. So to get something, if a new tile costs a stone and a wood, you're not discarding the stone and the wood you have. You just have to be able to produce stone and wood to place that tile. Similar to other elements of other games, you can buy resources from other players as well. So if you cannot produce one of the resources you need, you can always spend money and pay it to your next door neighbor and leverage the resource that they may be able to produce as well to pay the cost to place your tiles out. And you play 3 quick rounds, you fill up your board as best you can, you deal with your events, and that is the game. Mm-hmm. I like city building games. I like drafting games. I think Neom does both totally serviceably well. I think the resource management is totally fine. I think the art is good, but there's a trade-off because there's so much information on these little square tiles. They're like maybe 2-inch tiles, maybe 1.5 inches. They're smaller tiles. And in the upper left, you have what the tile costs. In the bottom right, you have what it is producing in terms of income and things like that. And in the top right, you have points that it's worth. And then you have the roads that are drawn on as well. And then you have the little building. There's a ton of information on each of these tiles. And 1, it's a lot to visually consume. And 2, it really does interfere with you. For me personally, trying to sinking into the theme. A lot of city building games have really cool building art and things like that. And these also have cool building art, but they're to accommodate the gameplay itself, there's all the iconography and things like around kind of overwhelm the actual art, which I think is a trade-off. On one hand, you need to play the game. On the other hand, I wish the art could have popped a little bit more for me.
Right.
I like Neom. I really do. I like the futuristic setting. As you get into the 3rd round, as tiles get more expensive, because they are tiered, so you're getting more and more challenging and more high-scoring tiles later in the game, like cars. well, you have to have a car. It's fun to do. So many of these resource games take place in ancient civilization and things like that. It's fun to me to have futuristic settings. I like that. And that's one of the things I was excited about Neom. But ultimately, Neom is a really, really good game, but not necessarily a great game. And I think that people's mileage of this game will vary depending on what they already have in their collection.
Right.
I have a few games in my collection that I think do similar things in different ways, maybe in more challenging ways. I find Neom to be very straightforward. I think it's a game you can play with, middle school kids and things like that and older. So if you've got a group that is looking for, if you like that Seven Wonders drafting, but there's something about Seven Wonders, it's a good little drafting game. It's got that city building. It's pretty straightforward. I like some of the resource management in it, things like that. I like it, didn't love it. Neom, I think it's a solid game. And if your collection doesn't have that, if you like the theme, if you like the art, if something about it pops for you, it's definitely worth a try.
I found with Neom, when I saw the box, I kind of went, I don't know. I was like, okay, I don't know. It just looked really generic. And then I had no idea that it was a tile drafting, city building type game. I'm like, oh, that is not what I would have gathered from looking at it. But I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. It just didn't call to me.
Yeah. And it's tough with so many games coming out. It's tough to vie for that attention. I understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, maybe it's one I got to give a whirl. We'll see. All right. So the last game I'm going to talk about before my voice completely gives up on me.
I know. I can hear it. Oh.
It's like struggling. It's like, stay in the game. It's Forum Trajanum. And yes, I've been waiting to play this at least a few times before I talk about it. That's why I hadn't talked about it earlier. So it is designed by one of my favorite designers, Stefan Feld. Art is by Michael Menzel. Publisher is Hutch and Stronghold Games. So this retails for approximately 60 Canadian, and it goes for $70 US. I'm not sure if it's available right away. It might be on pre-order, so you'll have to double check on your website or with your local store. It's 2 to 4 players, and it plays in about 60 to 120 minutes. I will say that is a lie for your first game. It will be slightly longer, especially if you're playing with full player count. If you're playing in an hour, you are literally playing with 2 people who know the game well. So I will just jump right in and say that it is slightly longer than what's stated. So in Forum Trajanum, each player governs what they call a colonia, which is founded by the Trajan himself and is the head of the Roman Empire. So basically players are trying to develop their colonia and support the emperor's building project. That's the kind of gist of where the game is going. There's a lot going on in this game, so it might be kind of hard to visualize everything, but it kind of gives you an idea of some of the complexities and interesting bits to the game. So in the setup, you have a main board. So this is what's constituted as Rome. And depending on how many players you have, so you have the main board, and depending on how many players you have, it will depend on the kind of mosaic board you have. They're going to create the forum area. So this is where you're going to be creating some runs of some envoy tiles you have for scoring. So you want to make sure that you're lining those up according to the rules for those amount of players. Then you'll have some street cards, and you're going to place some of these. I think it's 3 in a face-down pile, and you're going to leave those on the side of the board. So those are going to go in a space, and it's kind of going to track the cycles, which are kind of like years. And I think there's 4 seasons within a year. So these are going to kind of tell you where you can take tiles from on your own player boards. Then you have some double buildings, single buildings. These are kind of sort, and they have colors and they have gray buildings. And these are things that you're going to be able to build throughout the game on your player board. And these are actually going to score based on the, can't remember the exact terminology for these ones, based on the cranes, I think it is, that you have open, and then the amount of colored tiles matching that crane, and those will score during a scoring session. Players on their board are going to have what you call envoys, and there's these little tiles which on the other side are going to have potential actions or resources that you can acquire when it comes to your turn. So this is considered your colonia area. And the the envoy tiles are ones we're going to be drafting. So we'll talk about that in a moment. There are also some kind of objective life cards that are placed on the side of the board, and these are something you can complete at the end of every cycle. So after cycle 1, 2, and 3, things that you can go forward to try and complete. So on the player board, like I said, you're going to have a whole bunch of envoys. So these are those little tiles that are going to be face down, and then you have another spot where you can place citizens. Citizens are things that give you special abilities throughout the game, and these are things that you can find matching symbols on an envoy tile, and they can be placed as a citizen versus resources. Kind of hard to visualize, but I think you get an idea of what they'd be used for. So basically what happens is the game's played over 3 cycles on a player's turn. What you want to do is everybody will choose 2 tiles from their colonia, look at them, decide which one they want to keep and which they'd like to pass to the next player on their right. And then you look at the 2 tiles you do have and choose one of those to use. Now you do have possibilities of using both, and this depends on the type of worker you use. I think they're called tribunes, which allow you to play these 2 tiles. There's also builders, and they also have workers, which will help you build buildings on your board to try and get those points. So that's general, just the game. I'm going to everything, but on the board, there are several areas once you build a certain type of building to push you up certain types of track, which give you resources, which give you points. And of course, at the end of every cycle, there is scoring. It is a feld, so you cannot get away with having no scoring. So basically at the end of the 3 cycles, you do your last scoring, and the player with the most points wins. So that's a very brief synopsis of the game. It is definitely intense, but I didn't want to go into too much detail to give you an idea of how the game plays. It's a lot. Even explaining it here to you now is really hard to picture, but it's a feld. So picture the fact that there are multiple tracks to score, multiple ways to score. Sometimes it's best to do things early because they're worth more points in the beginning. I enjoyed it. It is a little fiddly to set up because of those envoy tokens I was telling you about. There's a lot of them. Every player's got to do it on the board. And, it's a minor thing, but yes, there are a bit of things going on there. I like the fact there's lots going on, but once you get into the game, the actions are straightforward. It's how you strategize. I know I talked about a few people were saying they didn't like the fact that the envoy tokens on your board are face down. They think it would have been better if they were face up. And then you could see your board and decide, oh, well, maybe I should take this and take this because it'll give me this ability. I beg to differ. I look at it as when you go to a restaurant and you see a menu with like 30 items and you see a menu with 5 items. When you go to the restaurant with 30 items, you sit there, I don't know. There's a lot going on here. So many choices. And it takes you about half an hour to figure out what you want. And then at the end of it, you may not know what you want. Versus going to
I feel like you're calling me out.
Oh, actually, totally not at all. I was trying to make it relatable. It just happened to be about food. But if you go to the restaurant with 5 items on the menu, you're less likely to take 30 minutes agonizing. It's like, well, your choices are very limited. So snap to it and pick something. You know what I mean? So it feels kind of like that. So I don't know if I agree about having everything visible. I like the tactical aspect. These are the tells you got to work with. And as Tim Gunn on Project Runway says, make it work. And I definitely make it work. So if you are not a tactical player, I don't think you won't enjoy it. It just definitely is. You may feel that's a bit more random and hard to plan, but I definitely think it's workable, and I enjoyed that aspect of it. So I liked a bit of the surprise in having to work with what was given to me. It's restrictive. I like that. Overall, I enjoyed this game. If you are a Feld fan, you will want this game in your collection. Those who are not Feld fans, not to say that you wouldn't dislike it, but I definitely think that there are others you may prefer. So
interesting.
I really enjoyed it. So it's kind of hard because me as a Feld fan and as someone who likes the heavier games, I liked it. I appreciate what it does. I very much enjoy it and would play it again. We had a great experience with it. Someone who's not a Feld fan, maybe this is new to them. Like I said, they might find some elements random. They might not kind of enjoy some of the things in the game that I do. I think it's good. Is it amazing? I don't necessarily think it's amazing, but I think it is a solid, good game. Time, it is long. The first time you play it, there's a lot of you got to think and, do I want to play this? So yeah, it is going to run you into the 3 hour if you're playing with full player count. But yes, I'm sure it'll get shorter as it progresses. So for me, it is definitely one that I would recommend you try if you do like kind of a heavier game. You like Feld, or hey, you just want to try something from Feld that's heavy. Give it a go. I think you'll enjoy it. The art for me was, whatever. Sorry, I have to say it like that because it could have been anything. Sure. Definitely better than Carpe Diem. We will save that for another episode. The game is good. The art is something else. So we'll leave that for now. But definitely, it was okay. The art, it's fine. So overall, Forum Trajanum, I enjoyed it. I implore you to try it. Really hard to give a good explanation without seeing it. So I apologize if that was a bit confusing. I tried my best to limit it to the basics. But definitely give it a go.
All right. I have a copy. I have not managed to play it yet. I found that a bit like a lot to take in.
It's a lot.
But that's sometimes how it is, right? Especially with heavier games. It's hard to podcast heavier games sometimes, especially if you're trying to give a sense of all the actions that are available and things like that. All I know is I look at, and this is without judgment on the gameplay at all, I just look at something like Forum Trajanum. I look at the cover. I scan the BGG page. I listen to what you're saying. And my heart just desperately wishes it had a different setting.
It's true.
I don't object to I have no issues with it per se. I just find it, what you were saying, and I think you even said this essentially, Mandi, is it could have been anything.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of games in this setting, and I think I would be really tickled. Like with Neom, I was really tickled that it was set in the future. I wish that they had gone a little bit further with it, but I liked having a pool noodle as a resource. And I look at something like Forum Trajanum, and I am totally looking forward to trying it because I do like Stefan Feld, not as much as you, but I enjoy it. I wish I look at that cover, just like you were looking at Neom and like, what? I look at the cover of Forum Trajanum, I'm like, I don't know.
I agree. It definitely could have, they could have taken it elsewhere. I agree.
Alrighty, well, I'll give it a try. Well, to wrap up our games played, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Hokkaido. Hokkaido is, I don't know if it's the sibling or the sequel or the follow-up or what you want to use to a game called Honshu. And Honshu's game, I was mad about when it first came out. I just loved it. I loved it's a card game that plays like a tile laying game essentially. And I was so into it. And the more I played it, the more it really revealed itself to me and to other players as well that the magic was in the card play. It was in the tableau building, not in how you got these cards. Now, that setup said, Hokkaido is this follow-up game by the same designer, by the same publisher of Honshu. Hokkaido is designed by Cal Malmioya. Malmioya? I'm going to go with that. And it's published by Lotopelli, and it'll be coming out in a broader market by Renegade Games, who also published Honshu. And it'll retail for $25. Now, if you've played Honshu, Hokkaido is very, very similar. And I could probably give a 1-minute overview using Honshu as a base. It's like Honshu, but for all of y'all who haven't played Honshu, I will not do that. In Hokkaido, you have a deck of cards, and they are split into a grid, a 2x3 grid. And each of these little squares will represent a different kind of terrain, whether it's a city, a mountain, what they call a fallow, which is just like a grain field or a blank field, things like that. And you're going to get these cards, and as you get the cards, then you're going to lay them out and your tableau in front of you. And at the end of the game, you're going to score based on the little areas that you've managed to create mostly. So how big of a lake do you have? You're going to score a certain number of points for your big lake, that kind of thing. Now, in Hokkaido, there are a few twists to that. First of all, Hokkaido is a drafting game. Honshu was not. And I think it was a great move to switch from this kind of bidding system that Honshu had into this drafting, very straightforward drafting game that Hokkaido has. So it's 2 rounds of 6-card drafting. So you'll ultimately be laying out 12 cards into your tableau. You get to overlay these cards a little bit. So I find that a really fascinating element as opposed to just aligning them side by side. Ultimately, your area will look very, very different in shape and form. And I feel like that's dynamic on the table. I just like how that looks and feels as you're overlapping squares to make your areas work. And there is also a, resource management kind of element to this, because some blocks have a resource square that when you play the card, you put a little cube on it. And then other squares will have a delivery point where it wants those cubes. And at the end of the game, you can, whatever cubes you have on your board, if you have a matching demand point, you can deliver them and get points for that. Overall, that all works great and will feel very similar to Honshu. Hokkaido does a few things differently. In Hokkaido, you have mountains that you didn't have in Honshu, and everybody's starting card has a mountain. And then when you play the next card, your mountains have to connect. They must connect, which puts an interesting new limitation on card placement that I actually really enjoy. And ultimately, what this mountain range will do is divide your play area into 2 sections. And that matters because you will now score your smallest city on both sides. So between the 2 sides. So you have to balance how your cities are building up on either side of the mountain if you want to score well in your cities. Another really interesting thing that they introduced in Hokkaido is terraforming. So now you can take 2 cubes from your area and turn them in for a terraform tile, which you can place on any of the fallow, those blank kind of grain fieldy, whatever they are. You can put this terraforming tile on it, and the type of tile will match the type of cubes you turned in. So if you turn in 2 blue cubes, you're going to get a lake tile, that kind of thing. That is super interesting because if you've been struggling to connect areas, that little terraforming tile can be a point saver. It can magically open up areas and really give you a whole bunch of new options, but it comes at a cost. And if you think you're going to terraform, you actually have to really plan ahead because of that 2 cube requirement, and they have to match. And if I don't need a lake, but I got 2 blue cubes, it doesn't really matter. So terraforming, I think, is very powerful, but it takes a lot of planning or a lot of luck to get exactly what you need. So it's something that you have to insert into your mind at the beginning of the game that I also think is nice. So what Hokkaido really did, especially in comparison to Honshu, and perhaps it's unfair to compare it to Honshu, but they're so similar in so many ways. I think it's a natural thing to do. Hokkaido made getting the cards simpler or more straightforward, but made the city building element more complex. And I personally love that trade-off. I think it really, really works. So it took Honshu, which was a game I really, really enjoyed, and ultimately ended up enjoying Honshu more at a 2-player count because of the way you accumulated cards. So it took Honshu, which I kind of settled into, I like it for 2 players, and propped it right back up there for multiplayer play. And it plays great at 2 players as well. And it's interesting, they're very specific in the rulebook. They even call out Honshu and they say, hey, you can play Honshu with drafting too. Just follow the drafting rules here and you can play Honshu. So clearly they realize that the way you got cards was not the most compelling part of Honshu. And so they took the compelling parts, amped them up, and adjusted the less compelling part. And I think Hokkaido is a lovely, lovely package. And it gives me what I loved about Honshu plus. So I'm really enjoying Honshu. The art, again, is quite lovely. It's got a wintry theme. So there's snow on things. So some of the art will feel very familiar to Honshu, but they've put snow on things, which I know seems like such a small thing, but I like it. It's a nice little art detail. If you like this kind of game, this kind of card tile laying game, I really enjoy Hokkaido. And I think it's a great pickup for the price and for the player count flexibility, because I think it plays great from 2 to 4. I think it's a good one. And that is Hokkaido.
Do you need Honshu? Like, if you're like, I don't have Honshu, should I just buy Hokkaido, or do I need both? Like, if someone's looking, maybe they kind of go, okay, Hokkaido may be more for me. Like ones, I know they're slightly different in game mechanic there, but if someone was looking to buy, do they need both? Is it okay to have both? Is it, you know what I mean? People are trying to streamline their collection. So what are your thoughts?
That's a great point. If I could only own one, I would personally pick Hokkaido. But what I would say is I like the extra limitations or that extra planning that the terraforming puts in. I like that slight notch up in gameplay complexity, so it's a match for me. If you want a slightly easier going gameplay experience, then you might want to play Honshu just with the drafting rules. I prefer the drafting rules. You can play Honshu. They're very specific. You can play Honshu with the drafting rules. So if you want a slightly simpler tile laying game, I would consider Honshu. If you want a slightly more complex one, I would consider Hokkaido. And you can't, they're not totally interchangeable because of the mountain complexity and things like that. I also forgot to mention that Hokkaido also has goal cards, which I really like. So there's random, you shuffle them up, you put them out, and they have different goals, like first one to one of each type of terrain, or first one to X size lake, or whatever it is. And that's another nice little thing that comes into play for scoring at the beginning of the game and just twists up. It adds just enough focus at the beginning of the game, and because they're so different, you only play with a certain number each game. It adds a nice little bit of variability as well, and that comes in Hokkaido. So you can do either. Honshu's going to be more straightforward. Hokkaido's going to be a little more complex. I currently own both. I don't have any plans on getting rid of Honshu, but I like the extra complexity of Hokkaido.
Nice. Looking forward to trying that one. Very much so.
All right, let's leave the analog world and do a quick trip to digital land, shall we?
Okay.
Let your fingers do the walking in. Tap that app.
All right, so now we are in the digital world. My voice is slowly fading, so it won't.
I can hear it declining as we talk. I feel so bad.
It is. It's trying to hang on, so I apologize for making your ears bleed, but we'll try and make this quick. So my app I'm going to talk about today, it's a little odd because I'm still trying to acquire apps for my phone. It's kind of here and there. So I've been play testing in beta form the app for the game Wordsy. And this, the game is actually published by Formal Ferret Games, and it looks like it's being done, the app, by Wheeler Games. So I can't give too much away because it's still in the beta form, but if you're familiar with the game Wordsy, it's a spelling type game. So you have a kind of graph of cards with letters on them. Some of them have additional bonuses, and you're trying to create words. The fun thing about this is you can actually pull in letters that are not visible on your tableau of cards. So, you might have W, X's, Y's, and you're like, what am I supposed to do with this? It's okay. You can actually pull in other letters that are not visible. You're just not going to get additional points for those letters that are not showing up on this tableau. It's very straightforward, a lot of fun. In the app, it plays very much like the game. I've been playing it on the easy, medium, hard, brutal. Easy. It took me quite a few tries to get past easy, and I thought I was doing pretty well. And I'm just playing against the AI. But it does count you down. There's a timer. You don't have time to sit there all day and ponder. You got some time to figure it. You don't have a lot of time to figure it out. And you can set the timer. So I like the fact that happens. So they do give you some options in the game. But if Wordsy is a game that you like in, the tabletop version, I definitely think the app, you'll like it. Right now, it's very straightforward, not super crazy fancy, but it doesn't need to be. So I don't want to give too much away because it's not officially out yet. It's still in beta. We're still testing. I'm just giving some input. Something to look forward to. So if you do like the word games, if you've never tried it, highly recommend it. For those of you who are fans of it, I think it'll tickle your fancy. So more to come.
I am envious that you have this access because I don't, and I really enjoy Wordsy, the physical game, but so I'm envious and I'm excited. I didn't even know there was an app coming out of it. So this is awesome news.
Very exciting.
For those of you who aren't familiar with Wordsy, that's okay. It is a really great word game that's got a little more flexibility in some ways, but it's also frustrating to me, and I'll tell you why. On Twitter, they set up a Wordsy bot. There is a Twitter account that lets you play Wordsy with this thing. So the Wordsy bot puts out a tweet with the letters, just like the Wordsy game, and then challenges you to come up, and then it reads your replies. But then once the time, whatever time limit they put on that tweet comes up, the Wordsy bot will say, hey, the best word I could find is. Now, sometimes you look at it and, the best word I could find is development or whatever. And that's totally fine. And the Wordsy bot will always beat me, and I'm growing to accept that. But then sometimes you're playing Wordsy bot, and then they're like, the best word I could find was magnetofluidity dynamics.
What?
Or the best word I could find was mega gamothopophites. You should go check out WordsyBot on Twitter. Or phenyl, like they have like scientific names in the bot.
Right.
Phenylthiocarbamides.
Oh my goodness.
I'm like, come on, WordsyBot. What you doing here? So I'm a little terrified of the app because if
it's definitely not doing words like that.
I'm doomed.
Oh, and so I should clarify for those of you who maybe hadn't heard a previous podcast, I switched from iPhone to Android, so I am playtesting Wordsy right now on Android, and definitely smooth play so far. But it will be available on both.
All right.
Yes.
Well, available on both platforms is Morels, the app version of Morels from new developer Mossbark Games. And the card game is published by Two Lanterns Games. And Morels it's a fairly well-liked two-player card game. Not everybody has heard of it, but almost everybody I've ever talked to that has played Morels enjoys it. And as the name would hint, Morels is a game about hunting mushrooms and collecting mushrooms. And from a card game perspective, it's just a set collection game. So you get a lineup of mushroom cards, random from a deck, and then you are going to take a card into your hand, or you're going to play sets of mushrooms. And thematically, you're cooking them, and you have to have a pan card. And then you play your mushroom cards with your pan card, and you cook up your mushrooms, which I think thematically is adorable.
It's very cute.
Even better, there are butter cards. And if you play butter cards, if you have enough mushrooms to play a butter card, it gets even better. And,
that's hilarious.
From a thematic point of view, I just think that's adorable and charming.
It's very cute.
You can basically save up. You're going to have a hand limit. There are things you can do to adjust that hand limit. You're going to save up your mushrooms to try to play them in sets because there's minimum numbers and things like that. Or you can turn in pairs or more of these cards for sticks, foraging sticks. And you want foraging sticks because the two cards at the end of the line are free, but the cards deeper up the line, you have to pay sticks to get early. Now, you could wait and hope that they reach the end of the line to be free, but that gives your opponent a chance to take them. And the way that this works is that the line always slides, and the card at the end of the line always gets put into this decay pile. So you have to really look ahead and you're like, oh, well, even if my opponent doesn't take it, it's going to head in the decay. So having sticks so you can buy up the line is really important. There's opportunity for you to take the decay pile. There are, I forget what the mushrooms are. They're bad mushrooms. There's like night poisonous mushrooms that if you get, they hurt you. And there's moon cards that give you random mushroom cards that are extra powerful, but they're random. And really, Morels is a straightforward game. It's very pleasant. It's a lovely two-player game. It's very approachable overall. Mm-hmm. And the app does a great job of porting it over. The app is delightful. It's smooth playing. You can play pass and play. You can play against 3 different levels of AI. I think Morels plays great pass and play. And it's an interesting thing, especially on an iPad. I think it plays fine on a phone, which is more likely to be on the go restaurants, waiting for a meal at a restaurant kind of gaming. Once you know the mushroom cards by art and you know what to key in, it's totally fine on a phone. The icons are fairly small on a phone though, but I think you get used to that pretty quickly. And one of the nice things the app has is it's less fiddly because in Morels, you're constantly sliding these cards down the lane. The app does that for you. And that's quite pleasant. So if you don't know how to play Morels, the app will teach you how to do that. The interface is straightforward. All the art from the regular game, the card game, is in the app. And I think this new developer, Mossbark, did a lovely job porting it over. It's available iOS and Android. And if that kind of thing sounds like you would enjoy it, I definitely recommend you give it a try. Morels, the app, iOS, Android, it's delightful. Check it out.
Now, isn't Morels the mean game? Is this the one that's a little more take that kind of mean? Maybe I'm thinking of a different game.
I think you're thinking, other than drafting out from somebody.
Okay.
I don't think there's too much take that in this one.
Okay. I don't know. I've heard people say it can be mean, but I don't know much about the game. So, okay, that's interesting then. All right. It's one I'm going to have to visit. So I don't know if some people are just playing it more aggressively than others.
Maybe. That's entirely possible too. All right, Mandi, before we lose your poor voice, let's talk a little bit about setting up and breaking down games.
We ask, you respond, we discuss. Let's talk hot topics in Victory Points.
It feels like it's been a while since we've had a Victory Point segment, but this is when we go out onto the Dice Towers Board Game Geek Guild and pose a question. Sometimes it's a poll. This time we just put kind of an open question in a post there, and you all get to chime in and tell us your thoughts. So this week we asked, what is your group's policy on setting up and putting away games? And Mandi, this was actually a topic that came up from you and your group, I think.
Yeah. So I was at a game night, actually, and a friend was talking about, he was listening to some podcasts and other things about etiquette, and cleanup was one that was kind of neglected on a couple of these. So cleaning up board games, I'm like, interesting. I'm like, well, we'll toss it up and talk about it.
And thank you so much to everybody who chimed in and left your comments. It's really super fun to read through them. And if you're not checking out the Board Game Geek Guild, you should. It's such a great community. It's pretty active there. And especially for our Victory Points questions and polls. So let's take a look at what some of you said about setting up and cleaning up games. And then, Mandi, I want to hear your opinions too.
Oh, I have some. Don't you worry.
Oh, yeah.
So the first is from Edward. And Edward states that setting up for our group is usually done by the person who owns or brought the game. Unless someone else knows how to play the game and the owner doesn't, then usually the knowledgeable one sets it up. So they could generalize by saying the teacher of the game would be the person who primarily does set up. For putting it away, everyone helps with that because everybody usually knows after playing the game what needs to be separated or collected together and so on. The game owner will be in charge of putting it all back in the box, so it is how they like it, but everyone pretty much pitches in with the owner directing. So I definitely see a few things here where I say, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Definitely in setting up, I guess I can understand if someone's teaching a game, they'll generally have an idea of how they want it set up. Now, something that Edward talks about at the end about directing, even if I'm teaching, I will always offer, and I am all about directing. So if I know a game, I'm like, great. So I'm going to give you these cards. Can you shuffle these, please? And you're going to put them here. And then so-and-so, great. While they're doing that, I'm going to get you to do X, Y, Z. Do you mind doing that? Thank you so much. And so giving everybody a task. I'm like, wow, I feel like I'm out of work, but it goes a lot faster if you kind of delegate and then let people know where they can put things versus not. But so there are some points in here where, yes, I could definitely see that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Edward hits on kind of my approach overall, but it's interesting because Blair, I think, gets to what you were saying in a way, Mandi, because Blair says, my group doesn't have any explicit expectations, but most people help. Most interesting. A part of it is that we typically play 2 or 3 different games in a night, and the sooner the last game is packed or the new game set up, the faster we can get back to playing. And so, Mandi, I think that goes so well. I mean, Blair's really just talking about chipping in, but I think your delegation point is excellent about how that just speeds up the process for everybody. And it engages everybody and makes everybody feel like they're part of the process, which they should be because they're playing the game.
Yeah, I gotta say, I am completely down with what Blair is stating here. It's true. Okay. get it done, next game to the table. And you're right. It works together when you kind of delegate things out. So I'm feeling that. Hey, more games we can get tonight, the better. But, so now what does, yeah. Go ahead. Oh, actually, I was just going to say, I was going to talk about what Art says, but did you have anything before I move on to Art?
I want to hear what Art says.
Okay, let us hear what Art has to say.
Come on, Art, bring it.
Okay. The game owner decides how much help they need and how people can help. It's okay for a person to not help if the person has already said that they need to leave at a certain time, and we decide to play a game that pushes up against that time limit. It's okay for a person not to help if the person has another responsibility that helps the group, like preparing food, etc. This brings up some very good points. So, you know what? I'm going to let you chime in on this one.
I love that Art mentions that there are scenarios. I think in general, and I think thematically, reading through everybody's comments on the forum, everybody feels there seems to be a sense that people need to contribute, that setting up or putting away the game on some level is just part of the game night. And there's some social responsibility to be part of that process. But I think Art brings up that, one, the game owner, some people are very sensitive about how their games are treated. And so whoever owns the game, setting expectations is probably a smart idea. But I like that Art also calls out that there are definitely scenarios that maybe helping set up or put away the game is not part of that person's responsibility. And again, the idea of setting expectations. Hey, y'all, I have to leave in an hour. I know we can finish this game, but I really have to leave. Is that okay if I still play? Yeah, sure. Sit down, play. We'll clean up. I know my group. We play together. That's not a big deal.
Sure, of course.
It's a lovely courtesy to make sure that everybody's on the same page ahead of time. And so I really like that Art kind of set those expectations and how that plays into it. I like that.
Yeah, I agree. And definitely if they know in advance, hey, this person's leaving, sure. Or sometimes I know, I can see that sensing someone's in a hurry. Don't worry about it. Go ahead. We have it, or I have it, whatever the case may be. I do have an issue, though, if someone just stands up and it's like, we finished the game. Oh, well, there it is. See you later. No. So I am the type of person that will usually be like, they stand up to leave. Oh, great. So here, can you put those in that bag over here? And I will engage them in the cleanup, because to be fair, I don't think it's fair that you would have 4 people there all cleaning and then one person decides, no, I'm going to go. Thanks. Bye. See you later. No, that's not. I personally don't think that's the right thing. But what Art's talking about, yes, I think that is a different circumstance.
Mandy, did you hit that a lot? I have to admit, for most of the events, I'm thinking through, certainly most of my local events, that's not a huge problem. We don't often have that scenario. I mean, first of all, I have a lovely group of people that just in general, we have the same patterns or social standards or things like that when it comes to gameplay. But I think even as I'm thinking to the broader experiences I've had locally, I haven't hit that a lot, but it sounds like you've hit it a couple of times, because you even have ways you deal with it.
I know. It's happened more than I would have thought. And when it's happened I find it surprising. And I think it's one of those things where this person's probably, or these people have always done that, and no one's ever said anything. You know, they just, okay, yeah, no problem, whatever. No, for me, especially because we're playing such large games a lot of the time, if the opportunity is there to help, at least ask. Do you know what I mean? I've literally seen people stand up, get up, go, and then go play another game or whatever the case may be. And I'm like, no, that's not cool. I think you should at least ask. And then you give the person the opportunity to say, you know what? It's okay. We have it, or whatever the case may be. It's happened more than I would have liked. Let's put it that way.
Interesting. It seems like it's one of those things like that last bite of dessert. And even as just a courtesy, even if you don't mean it, it seems like the polite thing to do is, no, you have the last bite, even though in your head you're thinking, no, that bite is mine. I want that last bite, right? It's like, oh, my friends are studying a game over there and I really, really want to go play it. But if you need me to help here, I could stay and help for a minute.
Sure.
At least they made some effort, right?
Exactly. Versus just walking away. So I definitely can understand that. And I think too, I grew up in a very strict household. I'm like very strict. So, we were really taught, and this is even what I'm going to talk about next has happened, but please and thank you. Just those little things. It's important. If someone gives you something, thank you very much. Or, can you pass me those resources over there, please? No problem. Here you go. Thank you. I know it's not a big deal for some people. It is for me because that's how I grew up. It just shows that, you respect this person. Same with cleaning up a game. Even if, do you need some help, to clean up? And they say no, you know what? You've offered, you've done your due diligence. Keep it moving. So for me, it's almost like a polite factor. But like I said, maybe I expect too much because I grew up in a very strict household and manners, things like that. It's very important. So yeah. Okay. So I'm going to jump into the next one before I start going on any more tangents. So Ferdinand states, in my groups, it's more of a courtesy than a policy. We don't have written rules for it nor an agreement beforehand. We just do what's needed to be done. Of course, there are exceptions to everything like my, Millennium Blade set, as they take my time to really, and I mean really, thoroughly shuffle everything and put back the cards in a precise order. It takes 20 minutes to create and shuffle the store deck and about 20 minutes, not sure what that's there.
To resort.
20 minutes to resort. Sorry, yes, I was missing anything there. I love this game and I don't want to pass the burden to the people I'm playing with. Okay, so... yeah. So so the courtesy and a policy. It's not a policy, but there are lots of things that happen in this world in gaming that are not written rules, but it's one of those unwritten things that you just do, or at least try to do. So courtesy, I guess, would be the right way to say it, in the fact that it's something you really should try and do. But yes, it's not written anywhere that you have to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just an unwritten kind of thing that you do. Exceptions like Millennium Blades. Yes, I have Millennium Blades. I absolutely get what you're talking about. I've done a playthrough of this game with Michael. So on our Teach and Plays, we did it together, but it's also, we both know the game. So we knew how it had to go back. Absolutely. Someone who doesn't know the game, I would not expect them to do it unless I'm telling them to put something in that game. It's not efficient by me telling them. It's easier if I just do it. 100%. I get that. What do you think?
I think that this, and I think Ferdinand is, does some game reviews as well, if I'm thinking of the right Ferdinand. And I totally I can envision this Ferdinand being so courteous, not wanting to burden. And I think, again, the owner of the game should set expectations. And I think it's always about communication as a group, whether it's your usual game night group or whether you're at a convention and playing with new people, just saying up front, hey, I could really use some help, or, hey, don't worry about it. I'm really picky about how I want to put things away. Because even though we didn't, obviously in Victory Points, we can't include every comment that comes in on the thread. So apologies if your comment didn't make it in here. But one of the themes that came out in the comments were some people are very specific on how they want their games played. There was one person who commented about their engineering background and how that made them very precise in how they want things. And I fully respect that.
Oh, for sure.
And people like Brian Counter, who, of course, Brian Counter is a Dice Tower contributor and a wonderful person who I've had the pleasure of meeting. Brian joined in and said, in both of their groups, everyone pitches in for both setup and breakdown, as they should. Mm-hmm. And Brian says, I have mini boxes labeled to help on this. Whoa. And as I have really neat friends, they orient stuff towards me for visual reasons because Brian Counter has visual impairment. So obviously that helps Brian out. But then I love this last thing from Brian. It made me giggle. The only exception to this is if the game owner is one of those clinically maladaptive control freaks with unwarranted hubris who insists on everything being processed in, quote unquote, the right way. And then we just let him do his thing and gladly step away. Nothing to see here. Move along. Now,
I love it.
Part of me goes, Brian, are you talking about yourself here? But I mean, ultimately, games are precious to many of us. Some people are like Tom, and they are totally happy dumping all of those components out on a table.
Yeah, that hurts me a little.
Like a wild ride. And then some people are much more cautious about how their games are treated. And especially if you're the owner of the game with the setup or the cleanup. Mandy, I really like your delegation thing. That's where we hope the owner can be a little more delegatory, right? And say, hey, this is your job. This is your job. I will do this. I think it's just a matter of self-awareness. Know who you are.
This is it. And I mean, listen, I get it. I probably sound like I'm really being picky, and it's not. I just think these are just polite things to do. You're playing the game. Hey, it's not your game. Somebody belongs to somebody, and you would want to be treated the same way, and your game is treated the same way. So yeah, you would want to make sure there's care taken and how it's put back. So whether you do it, but you set that expectation. I like what you say there. Set that expectation. And I think as a teacher, I'll sometimes joke around with people. I'll sing my little tidy up song that I do with the kids as a joke. I can't. My voice is terrible now. Otherwise, I'd sing it for you. It's rather amusing. But we're kidding around. These are people I know. We joke, right? I would never do that with people I don't know. That would be awful.
Really? But, I don't know.
No, it'd be. I don't know if that's appropriate. But I definitely think, to summarize, that people should at least offer. I'm not going to say everybody's going to be like, yeah, take your offer. Some people may not. And that's totally fine. But I think you've done your due diligence by at least offering. Like I said, I will often tell people if I see someone who's trying to make a run for it, and maybe not on purpose, sure, can you pass me your board, please? Can you put those cards together, please? Do you mind doing that? And it's a subtle way of kind of saying, hey, clean up your stuff. At least at that minimum, clean up your stuff. And then I have friends like Jose, where I'll lend him a game, or if we're setting up and he's like labeled the bags for me, everything's organized. I mean, bless him. I love it. That's amazing. But I don't expect that. Did you know what I mean? But common sense also dictates a lot of things. But yes, it doesn't hurt to ask the person whose game it is how they would like it organized. Just ask. Communication comes back to what you said.
Mandy, I got to ask though. Do you have any pet peeves about setting up or breaking down games or cleaning up games? I know I have one that's completely random.
Okay, maybe start with yours, because mine might just be ridiculous.
Okay. Well, my pet peeve, and pet peeves are minor things that just blow up in our minds, right? My pet peeve, when we set up the game, when people nest the box bottom in the box head. I hate it. I will undo it. If people do it, I kind of, the back of my head kind of goes, ugh. And then as soon as I can, I will reach over and I will unnest them and stand the lid off separately or set it aside separately or whatever. It just, for whatever reason, it drives me bonkers. You can't see the box title, and it can be awkward or fiddly later to pull it out because some boxes fit tighter than others. And gosh darn it, I just really dislike it. So whenever that happens, when somebody's opening the box and then they immediately tuck it under, I just go, eh.
Yeah, I do the same thing. And it's annoying because I have nails. So it's really hard for me sometimes to get the box out. Like it's suctioned in and I can't get it out. And then I get frustrated. I'm like, oh my goodness. I've actually ripped a box. My own, because someone had did that. And I'm like, oh, this is a problem. So I usually try and put it up so the box cover's facing out so people can see it. And then the box is open so you can reach in if you need things. Yeah, no, I have to agree with you on that one. Now that we're talking, there's a couple. So I think I'm odd with this. I like to put rule books on the bottom.
Ooh.
Because it keeps it flat. When you put them on the top and you have a game that has, now it depends. If the board sits on the top, then I think the rules should be on top. If the board is on the bottom of a box and then it has a whole bunch of bags of components in there and you put the rules on top, it drives me insane because then it's all like bent. I'm like, oh my gosh, seriously, if you put it on the bottom, it's going to be nice and flat. It looks better and your rule book will thank you. So I know it's really silly and I think I'm weird because I feel nobody does that, but I am thinking of the paper, okay? Making it nice and flat.
I'm thinking of the flowchart diagram. Where are you making Mandy happy? And this flowchart of, is the board stored on top? Yes, go this direction. No, go this direction. Are the rule? I can imagine your rule placement flowchart and it makes me giggle.
But it's funny when I see people putting it away and I'm like trying in my power not to say anything. I'm like, maybe we should put those on the bottom. Like I just don't. But inside I'm like, oh, it's going to bend it. You will.
Oh, I love it because this is your pet peeve. I will toggle that all the time because
I know.
I don't care. You're like, oh, I know. I've seen you do it, Suzanne. Love it.
As my eye twitches when you're doing it. No, I'm just joking. It's not that serious.
and of course, the way we are, I'm going to put it on top every time now, Mandy.
Oh, I know you are. It's going to drive me crazy. And then I'm just going to, when you walk away, I'm going to open the box, take everything out, which I've done before, by the way, and then put the rules on the bottom.
I love it. Oh my goodness. Those are the pettiest of pet peeves for sure. And I kind of love pet peeves sometimes. They're so petty. But sometimes
I know, it's so silly.
Well, thank you everybody for your thoughts on setting up and cleaning up games. I always appreciate you chiming in for our Victory Point segment. I don't know. I think, Mandy, just a whole segment on pet peeves would be hilarious. Let's let people really reveal their inner twisties. We'll see.
Oh, I have more, but I'm keeping them to a minimum for this show.
Oh, so we really do need to do a whole pet peeve segment.
Yeah, I think I might have to do a flow chart. You're not wrong on that. Let's save that for a Q&A.
Noted. All right. I am down with that. Speaking of Q&A, if you are listening to this when it airs, Mandy and I have a Q&A coming up on December 19th. This episode drops December 18th. So, if you prompt listeners, if you want to join us on YouTube on December 19th for our Q&A, feel free. And maybe I'll draw out some of more Mandy's pet peeves there.
I feel like this could be a game. I think I like where this is going.
And we will have for that Q&A or for a Q&A segment in our podcast that you're listening to right now. You should send us your questions. We do our best to get to them all, but there's a lot and we appreciate that. They're always fun to read. So my email is suzanne@dicetower.com.
And I'm Mandi. That's Mandi with an I at dicetower.com. And before we sign off, I should have mentioned this earlier. People have been asking about a video that I had done with Chaz about conventions and how we deal. It is up on YouTube on Pair of Dice on his channel.
I recommend it highly. It's, as somebody who doesn't necessarily have the same stresses that you and Chaz have, I was moved by it. It was just, It was so relatable. And I really applaud both of you for being so open and honest. And anybody who hasn't seen it, it's definitely worth seeking out.
Yeah. And if anybody has questions, they want to talk, or if you see me at a con and you want to chat, just send me an email or just come see me at a convention.
Alrighty, folks, that will wrap this episode of The Dice Tower. Thank you, as always, for listening. We love having you here. Next episode is episode 586. And guess what? The whole podcast team is going to be on board for the best of the year episode.
Woo.
So tune in to hear some of our favorites from 2018. Until next time, I'm Suzanne Sheldon.
And I'm Mandi Hutchinson.
And you've been listening to The Dice Tower.
Thanks for listening. Promotional consideration has been provided by game publishers in the form of review copies of games. This podcast is sponsored by listeners like you. Thank you for your continued support. And speaking of support, the Jack Vazel Memorial Fund is an organization dedicated to helping gamers in need. Learn more about the fund's mission and how you can help at jackvazel.org. The Dice Tower is produced by Tom, Suzanne, Mandi, and Eric, with assistance from Itai Perez, Derek Porter, Rob Searing, and Jeff Rademacher. Our theme is composed by Timothy Pinkham and arranged by Matt Bellier. And hosting is provided by Cool Stuff Inc. Let us know what you think of the show by posting to the Dice Tower Guild at BoardGameGeek.com, following the Dice Tower on Twitter, or by emailing us at dicetower@gmail.com. And don't forget to visit the other shows in the Dice Tower Network at dicetowernetwork.com. Until next time, from all the gang at the Dice Tower, have fun gaming.
All right, it is that time 2 truths and a lie. So I will start first. So I said that I can make my own wax, I can make my own soap, and I can make my own glue. If you said that making soap was the lie, you would be correct. I cannot make my own soap. I would like to, but I can't do it yet. Wax, and I mean specifically wax for the eyebrows or any unwanted facial hair. I can make a good natural wax.
Noted.
Yes, so great. When I was teaching children, you have these really cool recipes, to make glue, and it usually comes out, it looks kind of like a honey color, and then you can put them in the little bottles with the tops, and then you squeeze it and it comes out, and anyway, and they make it smell nice.
You're so crafty. All right. From last episode, mine were, I can bake a good cupcake, I can bake a good pie, and I can bake a good pretzel. And the lie is that I can bake a good pretzel.
Oh.
I love baking. I love baking. And without being too egomaniacal about it, I think I'm a pretty good baker. Unless it involves yeast. I am a yeast killer. And I can never, every time I try to do bread, unless it's like in a bread machine or whatever, but pretzels, I made pretzels once and they were murder weapons. They were so hard. I killed the yeast so dead. So yeah, I know pretzels.
All right. So no bread items at all. All right. Noted. All right. So the new ones for this week, I'm on a video game thing right now because I blew the dust off the old Xbox. So let's give this a whirl and see how it goes. I like Fallout video games, so the Fallout series. I like Red Dead Redemption, and I like Mortal Kombat.
Ooh, I'm so curious about this now. I don't know, and I want to know. All right, mine for this week are, I've backed over 360 games on Kickstarter. Nearly 25 of the games I've backed on Kickstarter are overdue. Oh. And on Kickstarter, I've lost nearly $800 on dead projects.
Oh my goodness. Actually, this is a good one.
Yeah, we'll see what happens next episode.
All right. Good luck, everyone.
This episode is sponsored by... From USAopoly is Tapple. Fast word fun for everyone. Get ready to experience Tapple, an award-winning fast-paced word game that gives families and friends a rush of excitement as they compete to beat the timer. Pick a category and get to thinking of words that fit the remaining letters around the Tapple wheel. But don't take too long to answer or you'll be out of that round. Be the last person standing to Tapple victory. Lots of fun for families and adults of all ages. Available at your favorite local game store today. For ages 8 and up, for 2 to 8 players, and the MSRP is $19.95.